In this video, we're going to answer the question that if sine theta is 40 over 41 in a particular quadrant and cos alpha is 3 over 5 in a particular quadrant, to evaluate the sine of theta plus alpha, cos of theta plus alpha, and tan of theta plus alpha. Well, we start with this information right here, that we know the value of sine theta and we know what quadrant it's in. When you see pi over 2 less than or equal to theta less than or equal to pi, that's like saying 90 degrees is less than or equal to theta less than or equal to 180 degrees. And what that tells you is that the terminal arm of theta is in quadrant 2. Now, we know that sine theta is equal to y over r. Well, since y over r is equal to 40 over 41, as I circled above, therefore we can let y equal 40 and let r equal 41. Well, we know the formula r squared equals x squared plus y squared, and so we plug in some numbers. 41 quantity squared equals x squared plus 40 quantity squared. So 1,681 equals x squared plus 1,600, and that means 81 is equal to x squared. So now x will be equal to the square root of 81, but we might be curious, do we put a plus sign in front? Do we put a minus sign in front? Do we put plus or minus? Do we put neither? How do we know? Well, in order to know that, go back up to the diagram we drew and look at where the terminal arm is. That terminal arm is in the second quadrant where x is always negative. So we know that we can put a negative sign in front of there. Well, negative square root of 81 is negative 9. So what that tells us is that the sine of theta is equal to, the cos of theta, which is obviously going to equal x over r, in this case will equal negative 9, because that's what we just said x is equal to, and over r, which is equal to 41. So the cos of theta is equal to negative 9 over 41. Now, let's focus on the cos of alpha equaling 3 over 5 given this quadrant. Well, when we say 3 pi over 2 less than or equal to alpha less than or equal to 2 pi, we're saying that alpha is somewhere in between 270 degrees and 360 degrees. It's in quadrant 4. Well, we know that cos alpha is equal to x over r, and since x over r is equal to 3 over 5, we can say x is 3 and r is 5. Okay, well, x squared plus y squared equals r squared. So 3 quantity squared plus y squared equals 5 quantity squared, meaning 9 plus y squared equals 25, y squared is equal to 16. Well, just like on the other side, we have to decide if y is going to be positive the square root of 16 or negative the square root of 16. What will it be? What sign should we put in front there, if any? Well, in order to answer that, we look at where the terminal arm is. We see the terminal arm is in quadrant 4. Well, a terminal arm in quadrant 4 is below the origin, which means the y-coordinate will be negative. So we're going to put a negative sign there. And negative square root of 16 is equal to negative 4. And so we can say that the sine of alpha, which is going to equal y over r, will be equal to negative 4 over 5, because r is 5 and y is negative 4. So we've got a couple of values here. We've got cos theta is equal to negative 9 over 41, and sine alpha is equal to negative 4 over 5. We bring those forward into the next slide. So what you see typed in red is what we just established on the other page. And now we're going to start using our compound angle formulas. The sine of theta plus alpha, as we know, is equal to sine theta cos alpha plus cos theta sine alpha. Okay, well, sine theta cos alpha is going to be 40 over 41 times 3 over 5 plus negative 9 over 41 times negative 4 over 5. Okay, and when we do that, we get 120 over 205 plus 36 over 205, which equals 156 over 205. That is what the sine of theta plus alpha equals. And that's what we were asked for in the question. Okay, the first thing being asked right here in the question was that. Now, the next thing being asked is what's cos of theta plus alpha? Well, the cos of theta plus alpha is going to equal cos theta cos alpha minus sine theta sine alpha. We're just using our compound angle formulas. Well, cos theta is equal to negative 9 over 41, and cos alpha is equal to 3 over 5, and sine theta is equal to 40 over 41, and sine alpha is equal to negative 4 over 5. That gives us negative 27 over 205 plus 160 over 205, which ultimately equals 133 over 205. And so we can give a value for the cos of theta plus alpha, as was requested in the question up at the top there. It equals 133 over 205. Now we've got a value for the sine of theta plus alpha and the cos of theta plus alpha. So we've answered this part of the question and this part of the question. So now we just have to figure out what's the tan of theta plus alpha. Well, it helps to keep in mind the sine of theta plus alpha and cos of theta plus alpha, because the tan of theta plus alpha will just equal sine theta plus alpha over cos theta plus alpha. That's a trig identity that you learned in grade 11. If you have the angles the same in a fraction and it's sine over cos, well, that equals tan of that angle. So that's going to equal 156 over 205 over 133 over 205, and we can invert and multiply 156 over 205 times 205 over 133, and these factors cancel out, and our answer is 156 over 133. That's the tan of theta plus alpha.